Hello and welcome to a conversation with Rajiv Chandrasekhar, BJP MP from the Rajya Sabha. Rajiv, we've been talking about a whole lot of issues, post the lockdown, during Corona times. But today there's been a new controversy that is regarding Facebook. I've noticed you wrote a blog also on it. You've been writing articles. The Congress has been accusing the Facebook and the BJP of conspiring to let this whole hate speech continue. They've even said that they're quoting a Facebook employee as saying that it's better not to censor such speech, otherwise we'll get into trouble by the BJP government. Now this doesn't really send out a good signal regarding the BJP, really.
No, but whose signal are we talking about? Are you talking about the Facebook signal or the Congress signal? I'm not so sure. Look, here, I think this is a reasonably funny debate because it is almost like people, just because you don't like something somebody says, then you will bully the platform or you bully the magazine or bully the TV channel to not allow that person space. Look, the Constitution of India provides under Article 19 the right to free speech. The Constitution of India under Article 19(2) provides restrictions to that free speech. There are certain conditions under which the right to free speech is deprived of any citizen. Now, every platform, every magazine, every news media organization has to subscribe to that basic tenet in the Constitution. Now, just because the Congress doesn't like something that somebody says, I don't think there is anywhere in the Constitution wording that says that because the Congress doesn't like something somebody says, that Facebook has to take it down.
Okay, so let's look at what the speech is. The reference to context. The speech that has come is calling Muslims traitors. It is a hate speech in that sense. Or would you say that such speech should be allowed regardless of whether a BJP MP makes it or a Congress MP makes it?
Look, I am nobody to talk on behalf of Facebook. I am nobody to talk on behalf of Twitter. I am nobody to talk on behalf of all these platforms. But the fact is, there have to be equitable standards that are applied by any platform. And those equitable standards have to be standards that comply with Article 19(2) of the Constitution. And if those standards are applied to one group on the left, they have to be applied to the group on the right. If they're applied to the group on the right, they have to be applied to the group on the left. Now, the problem with, and this really applies, this controversy or this confusion or this little debate is around political speeches. And it is not about any businessman calling another businessman bad or etc. Now, look, in political speeches, people do say things as long as it does not pass the test of inciting, it does not pass the test of creating violence, threatening violence. A person's opinion about another community, vice versa, I mean, a Muslim's views about Hindus or Hindus' views about Christians or a Christian's view about Muslims or Hindus, as the case may be, may not qualify for just takedown just because somebody on the other side doesn't like it.
But this is a view against a community calling them traitors. It's not even a Muslim versus a Hindu. It's a politician versus one community.
No. So I am not either subscribing to that or nor am I saying that is good or bad. I am saying the same standard should be applied. What I understand the controversy here is that there is a group of people on the left who want everybody on the right who speaks these kind of hateful statements taken down, but at the same time, people on the left or people like Owaisi and all of these people who spew hatred all the time should not be touched. The issue here is equitable standards. It is not about saying the right can say what they want to say, the left can say what they want to say, but there should be equitable standards, and those standards cannot be put into play in a platform by bullying by one section or the other. It has to be a standard that the platform adopts, and the platform then delivers on those standards equitably.
Bullying, the reason why the Facebook employee Anki says that let's not take down the speech is because it will be against the interest, let's not go against the interest of the ruling party.
I have already commented on this article that came out in Wall Street Journal. These are obvious, and I said I think that is a very shoddy piece of journalism because that article targets one person on the basis of selective internal leaks from that organization without establishing the full context of what is going on. Whether look, I don't know. I mean, I know the person, but I have no brief for that person. But did she say the same thing about somebody on the left? Did she say that these should be allowed? Now, this conversation is incomplete. This discussion is incomplete without knowing the full facts. And that is why I say in my article that you cannot allow this kind of Twitter-led bullying of platforms, internal people of an organization creating a coup d'etat, the left elements of an organization pressuring the editor or pressuring the CEO, pressuring others to take down only the right part of the conversation without discussing the entire thing equitably. So my point is, yes, there have to be standards. Those standards that incite people, create communal hatred, must be standards that are equitably applied to everybody. If somebody on the right says it, Akbaruddin Owaisi says it. Both of them should be taken down. It cannot be the case that the left suddenly finds Akbaruddin Owaisi as their little poster boy and he's fine because he's XYZ, but Tiger Raja in Secunderabad is not fine. Let's be clear. We apply the same standard and then there will be no controversy. Now for the Congress to jump into this is irony of the nth order, because
they've asked for a high-level inquiry in a malicious campaign. Terms of
being facetious, the only high-level inquiry should be into where the Congress has left its brains, or its memory, because these are the guys who introduced Section 66A in 2008 in a legislation in Parliament without any debate, and then went on to censor the internet and free speech for years till people like me went to the Supreme Court and got it struck down. So for the Congress, the free speech is when the right starts saying something. For the Congress, it is not free speech, or there's no restriction on free speech when it is their ally or their little comrade that is going out and talking violence and talking anything else. So I wouldn't take the Congress's view on this as being anything but political opportunism. But the debate is a good debate. I think the discourse around what is the role and responsibility of these big intermediaries, big internet platforms on ensuring that the conversations on these platforms are civil, are in a sense moderated, and do not trespass into or slip off into hate and that kind of incitement. That is a good debate to have, but not through the prism of the Congress viewpoint.
It's not just the Congress. A lot of people have reacted to it. You're saying don't just find the right wrong, find the left also wrong. But at least there is one speech that has been singled out, and that is wrong. So at least you all should say, yes, this is wrong, and let's find out what else is wrong also.
It is not for me to say it's wrong. First of all, I am not.
Okay, who gets to?
That is the platform's job. That is whether it is Twitter, whether it is NewsX, whether it's Facebook. If somebody,
they are saying we are scared to censor it because it will, the government will come down heavily on us, in so many words.
You read from an article that is based on selective leaks from that organization itself. Now, if I start taking things of one conversation that some anchor in NewsX does out of context without putting the entire context, I will conclude what I want to conclude. I am in no position to conclude on what I believe is a shoddy piece of journalism, because I'll tell you why it's shoddy. Because it attacks an individual based on leaks from an organization. Now, every organization has its politics. Every organization has its dynamics. If I start listening to leaks from your organizations about you, or you start listening to leaks from my organization about me, there are always disgruntled people who have some agenda other than this pretending to be protectors of free speech. So that is not correct journalism. The journalism should have been an absolute, complete analysis of the platform's record in handling various kinds of...
The record hasn't been very good either. You've seen what happened during the Trump campaign.
So my point is, I will only stick to my contention that this is shoddy journalism, where you target an individual. And that is a hatchet job. That's a hit job. And the left, and I say in my article, Priya, and I don't mean this to sound very political or like rhetoric, the left has a history of doing this. Because the left has dominated conventional media for so long, and their increasing irrelevance of conventional media and the growth of the social media platforms and the power of the social media platform is causing the left to figure out various ways of trying to mute the right on the social media platform. That is their go-to strategy. And I don't I don't grudge them that strategy, but to expect me to listen to the Congress lefties say that is the, some discovery that they've made, obviously not. I'll not accept that.
This argument always comes up whenever anytime we say that they are trolls or there's hate speech. This is the argument that comes back from the BJP saying, look, you guys have dominated, the Congress and the left have dominated the narrative through the mainstream so long that now that others are getting a voice, you are calling them trolls. But it's not always so simple, Rajiv.
No, it is simple. I'm sorry. Sorry, Priya, I'll disagree with you. This bullying on using Twitter bullying, and I am not saying this. You read the resignation letter of Barry Weiss that I've quoted, the lady who was bullied and pushed out of the New York Times. This is not a phenomenon that is unique to India. The left has dominated, the liberal left has dominated mainstream media for many years. They were students of liberal arts, they're students of journalism, and they've dominated media for many years. And now when the right is getting an equally powerful voice, or there are people in media that want to give the right's voice some place on these platforms, they are being hounded out. And so I'm calling out through this article this tendency not to engage in a discussion and win or lose on facts, but rather to create these hit jobs on people and force them out of platforms. And in this particular case, what is the intention of this article? This intention of this article is to pressure Facebook to take down BJP articles or the right articles, which the Facebook did. If the article comes out 2 days later, the two people whose content gets taken down are Anand Kumar Hegde and Tiger Raja. There is no mention of OIC. There is no mention of half a dozen other Congress, stalwarts who are there talking utter nonsense. So the objective of the article was never about any equitable standard. It was not about cleaning the platform. It was a group of people in Facebook trying to pressure Facebook to take down the content of the right, which they did.
How do we deal with this? Because there is a huge, whether it's Facebook or WhatsApp, that's half the conversation is taking place there, or they're half on Twitter, really.
This is the new world. These social media platforms, whether it's Twitter, whether it's Facebook, Google, Amazon, Walmart, they are dominating the internet today. Google, Walmart, and Amazon dominate commerce online. People complain about that, but that is the inevitable reality. Technology is making conventional media increasingly irrelevant. Technology and these platforms are making conventional journalists increasingly irrelevant. Now, obviously, the guys who are kicking and screaming the most about this are conventional old-style journalists, because they have always been dismissive of these modern platforms. They have always been dismissive where there is no need for editors to moderate and curate content and conversations. So
moderate is a word I'll take, not curate. Look at the kind of conversation that is happening also, Rajiv. There is need for some moderation.
Editors in India, in the conventional mainstream media, were not moderating. They were curating. They were deciding. An editor decided whether an article in the front page was about a coup attempt by a general, even if it is based on total fiction. An editor decided who to go after or who not to go after. It was absolute curated content. It was one man or two people deciding what content went out there. That model is being replaced now by millions of people on platforms having their own conversations. Good, bad, ugly. Yes. But what is and the challenge, I say in the article, that the challenge of holding these platforms accountable and at the same time not censoring conversation is an increasingly challenging one. It has always been there in media. If you remember the Indian Express of the old days, Ramnath Goenka days, really was a powerful voice. I'm not a big supporter, or I don't have too much of sympathy for old style journalists who sort of think, the days of the past were better days than the days of the future.
The days of the present as they are, you have one platform having near monopoly. Your earlier argument was about monopoly. So now we have...
I think while Facebook has a lot of people conversing on it, there are conversations happening. Youngsters are today on Snapchat, they're on WeChat. There are hundreds of other platforms that are mushrooming. Facebook didn't exist 10, 12 years ago. I'm pretty sure that some other platforms are going to come up which allow more conversations, different types of conversations coming for TikTok. There's so much stuff happening out there. We are focused on Facebook because all the old fuddy-duddies and all the political conversation happens to be concentrated on that. But the youngsters today in this country and in the world are totally off of these platforms and are doing something else. So I think we sort of tend to believe that this is more powerful than it really is. So,
there be regulation, or should they let water find its own level? Let everybody have a free for all.
I have maintained repeatedly, Priya, if you look at what I've said in Parliament many times, I've said that there has to be regulation. The intermediary guidelines, the IT Act intermediary guidelines have been tightened recently, making platforms more responsible for the content they put out there. Earlier, content for platforms used to say, no, we are not responsible, we are only a platform. Now the government has made it, tightened the guidelines and made the platforms accountable and responsible for anything wrong that happens there. And the law is catching up all around the world. Earlier, there were portions of the internet that were anonymous. People could sell drugs, they could commit crime. Those are all getting cracked down on. The internet is slowly becoming a cleaner and cleaner place. This is an evolutionary process. So, we must continue to evolve. And I think regulation, light touch regulation, accountability of the platforms, and the platforms having open, transparent guidelines, transparent, open, and equitable guidelines, which they apply without fear and favor. So they should be able to take down a Congress voice if it is wrong, or a BJP, or an OIC, or anybody. So equitable guidelines are required. And I have asked in the last session of Parliament, I asked that platforms should make their guidelines transparent. They should disclose their guidelines. Because, for example, some platforms like Twitter say, we have algorithms. What is in the algorithm? God knows. Some person has coded the algorithm. So it is important that we understand whether the algorithm has a leftist bias or does it have a rightist bias. Those are things that we should have a conversation about. But this conversation that the Congress has started is just plain immature and completely opportunistic. And for a party that was in bed recently with Facebook and Cambridge Analytica, now to suddenly pretend that the world has forgotten all of what happened in 2018 is, in my opinion, asking for too much.
Rahul Gandhi says this is just a version of the RSS BJP control of Facebook.
I mean, I can respond to Rahul Gandhi, or I can just say, look, forget it. What's the point? I mean, he says this is probably one of the less bizarre things he has said in the recent days. So I'll just let it go by as saying, yeah, there's another Rahul Gandhiism that doesn't deserve a response, or that can't be responded to.
I will take that because I don't want to get into a tutu meve on it. But on this thing, on the, you're also a media personality, you have a stake in this thing. So where do you see the future of media going? We talked about it, not just, aided and abetted by Corona. The print now are dying.
Yeah, I have a view on media, and it is a difficult time to be either an editor or a journalist or a media owner or a platform owner, because as media becomes much more, as more and more people can easily get plugged into media, the views that are driving media are just much more diverse. Earlier, there would be some letters to the editor, there would be 20 letters in a week, and the editor got that feedback saying 20 letters. Now, an editor or a journalist does a story, and he or she is either fated by, let's say, 500 people and is trolled by the other 600 people. So
on social media.
It is not easy to be a journalist today, especially a journalist who has very, very clear views and views that are based on fact, and so it is not an easy business. By no stretch of imagination, it's easy. I mean, a multi-billionaire like Mark Zuckerberg of Facebook is dragged off in front of the US Congress and made to answer all these difficult questions. I know for a fact, when I follow so many people on Twitter who are journalists, even the most well-meaning journalists today, with the best stories that they put out, in India I'm talking about, get hammered and trolled all the time on Twitter by people. And so this is just par for the course. Opinion is sharp, polarized, audiences are polarized. They expect news of either their type or nothing else. And so that is very difficult for everybody to be happy. So this is.
Would you be sorry to see the print word dying out, or would you think there is still space for the, the old way of doing news?
No, print I've maintained was on its last legs. I think COVID has just essentially been the last nail in that. Sorry to use a metaphor, but the last nail in the coffin of print. The future is more and more digital, mobile. And in my opinion, broadcast being delivered on devices like mobile. So broadcast still has a lot of life, in my opinion. But the platforms that the delivery mechanism of broadcast will change. It will be less DTH and cable and all that, and more portable devices like the phone and tablets.
Before we wind up, I just want your take on, well, our elections are far away, but the American elections are around the corner. We've seen, how do you see things happening over there?
No, I don't know. I think it's clear that the US, which is a country that I studied and worked in, and I still consider it is one of the best countries in the world for people for people who work hard and of enterprise. But it is clearly a country that is divided, and it's divided. As you saw the violence, I mean, it's not something that you'd expect in a nation like that, but it's a divided country, and we'll see how that division plays out during voting day. I think the world requires a strong, stable US. The world requires leadership of the US at this very difficult stage, especially with the rogue China that's out there. The US has to take the leadership of the free world, and so it's not in anybody's interest to have a divided, dysfunctional United States. And I hope the elections throw up a good answer to that.
Did we muck up our equation by saying "Ab ki baar Trump sarkar"? A lot of people are saying, if there is a Democratic win, if Biden wins, that's going to really, jeopardize our equation with the US.
I think the equation that anybody has with India will be on equal terms. India is one of the biggest markets in the world. It's
transactional.
No, it's transactional, it's ideological. We are democracies. I think the world has learned from playing footsie with China for the last decade and a half on how that turned out for the world. We all know that China has essentially, taken advantage of the world for the last 10, 12 years. And the world is waking up to it now. India represents to the world a vibrant democracy, an active democracy, a large market, a young country. And therefore, I don't think whether it's President Biden or President Trump, the US has a lot more to gain from friendships with India than it has with China or any other nation in this part of the world.
Another quick question is on, our economy, the economy. We've seen, I just did an interview with Dr. Swami also, and he pointed out there was something called the macroeconomic report, which came out in June, which says that during the last quarter, that is Jan to March last year, 2020, our GDP came to 3.1%. So he's saying this is even before COVID hit us. According to the Finance Ministry's own findings, GDP was at an all-time low. So it's just gone worse.
Yeah, so look, so I won't jump into an argument with Dr. Swami. It's not a very, those arguments usually end up in his favor. But I don't agree with him. I don't think. I think yes, the economy.
Report what it says, huh?
No, the economy was moderating leading to COVID. That we all knew. We've discussed that, and there were many reasons for that. I don't think you have the time for that. Discuss that today. But clearly, the April to June quarter, which is the first quarter of this financial year, and is also the quarter of COVID, has been harsh, not just for India, for the entire world. And it has hit us. It has hit us as it has hit 65% of the world economy. If big countries like US and Europe are still staggering from that COVID impact, India is not immune to it. But the real issue is how India comes out of it and how we start growing back. We are at about 80%.
So far.
Yeah, we are at about, in July, we were 85% of the pre-COVID levels. We will see August if it crosses 85 and reaches 90. And then if we reach close to 100, then we know that we are on a path to recovery eventually. But the conventional wisdom is that we would be okay, we would take some time to grow, and we will be okay in the early part of 21-22, which is the next financial year. So this is a patient waiting game, Priya. This is not something we brought on ourselves. This is what our neighbors, the Chinese, have exported to the world in their China virus export scheme or program. But we have to work hard, and this Atmanirbhar Bharat program and vision of the Prime Minister is one way of, in a sense, mobilizing the country and saying, look, we've just got to get to it, work hard, and ensure that in the medium to short term, we build back the economy to what it was.
There's no time for a counter view, so I'm going to hold you to that interview later on. But thank you, Rajiv, for talking to us. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
For more such videos, subscribe to the NewsX YouTube channel, hit the bell icon.